Hi there. This is the first actual video that I've done aside from the introduction, so pardon the weirdness at the beginning. But I'm Chris, and in this video I want to talk about a book called The Black Powder War. This is by Naomi Novik, who's written a couple of different series. This one, which is book 3 of Temeraire. My apologies to anyone who's French or speaks French for that pronunciation, as well as the I think it's the Deadly Education series, Scholarman series, sorry. Deadly Education is the first novel in that series. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this one. This is the first book I read in 2024. It's like I said, it's the third book in a series. So for anyone who hasn't read Temeraire, I'm going to give you a quick kind of synopsis of what that book or the series is about, how it starts, and then give you a couple opportunities to stop and go read for yourself if it sounds like something you're interested in. Temeraire is essentially, what if the Napoleonic Wars had dragons? Not just the Napoleonic Wars. What if the world had dragons during the age of the Napoleonic Wars, the Age of Revolutions, all that fun stuff? And that is really it. That's like the base premise. British officer finds dragon, joins much more egalitarian service, and hijinks ensue, battles are fought, comrades are lost, all that. It's a very bare bones thing. So essentially, a British naval captain, William Lawrence, in the first book, intercepts an egg going from China to France. For background, every kind of country has its own different dragons and different dragon breeding programs. The Chinese dragon breeding program, I'm putting that in air quotes for a reason, is seen as kind of by far the most superior. And a lot of European countries have tried to get their hands on a Chinese dragon for a while. They happen to find one, and it hatches. In this world, dragons kind of imprint, but it's not exact. Like, they have agency in it. They get to choose. They'll go around and be like, you seem good, feed me. And so according to the British kind of styling, when this egg hatches, William Lawrence is chosen by the dragon as his captain or companion, or however you want to phrase it. He puts the dragon into harness, which again is a phrase essentially just meaning, or not just meaning, literally meaning they put a harness on the dragon. It is in the kind of British tradition with these dragons. That's how you get them to be kind of tamed, controlled, get them used to being ridden. And then it goes from there. They go through training, they go and learn how to fly. William, who is from kind of the upper crusties of society and a kind of that very formalized British naval system, has kind of his own ideas of what's right to be proper and everything. And he gets thrown into a branch of the military which is very, very egalitarian, because they're riding dragons and the dragons have some agency. Like, they won't just take whoever. So there are people who are, commoners. I'm going to be using I may use a lot of classist language. This is related to the language of the book. There are a lot of people who are commoners, are not well-bred. There are women in the military, because certain dragons will only take female captains. Again, women, female, all kind of air quotes here for the terms of the book. And so he gets thrown into this world where he is trying to adapt to it, but also hold on to some of his own things and teach his dragon, because the dragons are sentient and speak and have varying levels of intelligence based on the individual dragon. Person, I guess, is a good word. And Temeraire happens to be a very, very, very intelligent dragon. Overall, the vibe of the series from the beginning, I really enjoy. you have a dragon and his rider who are talking to one another and being like, my dear, it simply isn't done. We must, like, very stereotypical British upper crust. And then this dragon who's like learning this and then is also like, but I do want that dragon's cow. Why can't I just take that dragon's cow? I want it though. So it's very weird. But yeah, broadly speaking, that kind of, all that happens. They're training, they're learning from one another. They go into the military service. They learn that Temeraire is a celestial, which is, it took me a second to remember that, kind of the highest tier of Chinese dragon. They have something called the divine breath, which is essentially extra powerful roar that will blow down trees or mountains, not mountains, like trees, and cause tidal waves and stuff like that. Very, very destructive, very intense. They discover this when they are repelling an attack by Napoleon on the British Isles. Temeraire uses this divine breath for the first time, ruins a whole fleet, using, again, air quotes, because this is a flying fleet. They're like airdropping people over. Anyway, this whole thing. That's, broadly speaking, the summary of the first book. Second book, sorry, I didn't even mention the first book's name. First book is His Majesty's Dragon. Second book, which I don't remember the name of off the top of my head. Give me 1 second. Bear with me. I wonder if it's in here. This will look kind of rough since I'm not planning on editing any of these, but it's fine. Throne of Jade. It's the second book, essentially because Temeraire is a Chinese dragon and he was stolen from the French. The Chinese are very much like, well, no, you're not who was supposed to have this, and it's a celestial. These are only supposed to go to royalty. This is not okay. We need to figure this out. They send a delegation, meet with William and Temeraire. Temeraire is very much like, nope, William's my dude. I'm not gonna take someone else. That's who I have. I'm not gonna partner with anyone else. And so the Chinese delegation is like, all right, well then you're coming back to China with us because we need to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to resolve this. They end up in China during, while there are boycotts going on regarding, China has shut their borders, especially to English merchants who are trying to sell opium in the country, which is there's a whole real world thing of that, the Opium Wars and such, where the British were forcing an addictive substance into a country and forcing them to buy it, and it is a whole thing that I am not properly educated on, and I'm not going to comment too intensely on, especially in this book about dragons. But whole thing, not good situation. Lawrence is a bit conflicted because he doesn't agree with the drugs and the addictive nature of it, but he also feels a responsibility to kind of help king and country in any way. Ends up kind of helping form a treaty, but still not like allowing the drugs. It's a whole thing. Anyways, they end up meeting the emperor, meeting Temeraire's mother, who is a celestial, meeting kind of these other people. There's a lot of court politics going on. There is a prince who thinks that Temeraire should not be with Lawrence and is working against them. There's a prince who kind of sees the benefit and is working for them. The emperor is kind of balancing all of these different currents within his court. He ends up choosing to adopt legally William and make him essentially a prince of China. And then they get around the whole, a celestial has to be with royalty. Okay, he's adopted, he's royalty now. But there's some people who disagree with that strongly, including the one prince that I mentioned. And he leads an attack on William and the group of people who came with him. They're rebuffed, the prince is killed, and kind of crucially for the story, the prince's dragon Lien ends up essentially, she finds her prince dead. Keen's mortally heartbroken, all of this. Very much like the dragons very much react this way when someone kills someone who they are bonded with, again, for lack of a better term. There are a lot of them, if they have like crews that fly on them, like people who are part of their military entourage, for lack of a better term, they're very protective of them, but especially their captains or their primary bonders or whoever, however you want to phrase it, that is like, no, like you are soulmates, for lack of a better term. They can kind of, the dragons live a lot longer, so they know someone will die at some point, but like someone being killed before their time is very much like a, nope, I'm gonna do everything I can to ruin that person's life. So Lien does this, finds out that they killed her prince, and she leaves China. They don't know where they are, and that is kind of the end of the first 2 books. So, Black Powder War. This book picks up pretty closely where the previous one leaves off, but they hear through the British ambassador that, why am I blanking on the word, Napoleon, that guy, is planning an attack on Russia, right? That's probably what happened, right? No, not quite. That happens. Give me a minute. So before that, they find out that the British had purchased some eggs from folks in Turkey, but they've been waylaid and kind of captured by the French, and so they need to try and get over from China to Turkey to find these eggs and get them back. They do so, they enlist the help of a half British, half Nepali man named Tharke. That's what he goes by primarily. Who is, I'll talk about him in a minute. And so they fly across most of Asia. They end up meeting these feral dragons and kind of conscripting them into this group where they don't let anyone ride them, but they're still ostensibly on their side. They make it to Istanbul. They are kind of well received, but also definitely imprisoned. Like very much one of those like, oh yeah, like you're a guest of ours, but you're not leaving type situations. And then they end up getting an egg, escaping with it. They aren't able to get the others, but they manage to get one. They escape, and then they end up with eventually making their way up to Prussia. And on their way back, the Prussians are being attacked by Napoleon, and they're like, nope, we need to help out. We are duty bound, honor bound to help out an ally. While they're there, they learn that Lien has joined Napoleon, has gone over there and is teaching them new tactics. So, which they find out quite devastatingly. The Prussians are like, yep, we're good. We've got these formations. We're going to be all set. We can beat them. Our discipline will beat them. And then essentially the French start using dragons to airdrop artillery and troops, like not even just in giant flying things, but the dragons will fly artillery to the top of like hills and will then bombard the encampments from there. They will fly troops on like smaller dragons with things where they could basically rappel down, like in helicopters in Vietnam, like fly over, drop in shock troops, have them just wreck shop. It's completely wrecks the Prussians. They are not able to do it. They are forced to retreat. They are forced to retreat back towards Russia, as has happened in the real world. And Lawrence and Temeraire and their whole group are forced to flee. They end up in a castle or keep fort, some sort of armament. What's the word that I want? Fortification. In Holland, I believe. Denmark? Probably Denmark. It's probably Denmark. And they essentially are trapped there. They're trying to get out. They can't, and eventually they figure out, okay, we have this way. We can get out. We can try and bring everyone with us. We managed to get word to the Brits. We can go. This is all complicated because the egg that they stole at one point hatches, which leads to a fire-breathing dragon, which are quite rare in this world. Her name is Skirka, I believe. Absolute menace. Absolute menace. No concept of that she shouldn't just be fighting everything all the time from the moment she's born. Wild. But yeah, and then they are set up, escape, and make their way back to England with this group of feral dragons, and everyone they've kind of collected along the way. And that is where Black Power War ends. It is, I mean, the series as a whole I really liked. This one is really where things kind of started. You start getting a sense of the stakes, especially like they're having to travel huge distances to try and stop things. They're facing battles where they're being shown, Napoleon is just able to completely outmaneuver everyone, and it really starts setting up the stakes of, we might not win this. This might not go well for our heroes. The characters, it's very interesting. Over the course of the first 3 books, Lawrence starts seeing, dragons as people and not just as like these animals that are pressed into service. But he also starts being exposed to other cultures and their approaches towards dragons. Especially he sees the Chinese, where they are very much like dragons are people. Cities are designed with dragons in mind. The streets are wide enough for dragons. There are separate houses or housing for dragons. They're given this honored esteem. They have jobs. They get paid. They have all, like, they are treated as equal members of society, or even like slightly upper tier, higher class, again air quotes, members of society by and large. And he really starts to see, like, okay, well, I can't try and say that the British way is better when it clearly isn't. He starts kind of reconciling, his preconceived notions of what is right and how to treat these creatures, and also like it starts challenging his notions of like loyalty and empire. And while he still very much sees himself as a loyal British servant, he is still trying to be like, all right, but there's a lot of issues. It's luckily he is established quite early on as being a bit more open-minded for the aristocracy. He's from a family where his father has been campaigning for the abolition of slavery, and so it's a whole thing where he is, at least he's upper class but open-minded, but especially joining the aerial corps, the group who fly the dragons. He very much starts kind of being thrown in where it's like, yep, one of these captains is a woman. She's wearing men's clothes because they don't want, like, if we kind of have to act like we don't have women in the service, but yeah, she's a woman. Like, deal with it. She's going to go and fight with you. She's actually going to be your commanding officer. Deal with it. I also really enjoyed, I very much enjoy just a gigantic dragon who is, like, over the course of the first 3 books, starts learning about cuisine, and is like, well, I need a chef. I need to have a private chef. Like, you're going to hire me a private chef, right, Lawrence? Because I can't go back to eating just a cow. I've had noodles. I've had rice. That's delicious. Like, it's very good. Just the whole, like, his whole, and like, Temeraire learns to read, he learns to write, he learns to do math, and these are things that he's good at and enjoys. But it's phenomenal to see this, and like, a lot of it is because Lawrence, kind of when the dragon is young, he doesn't really know what to do, so he's just like, all right, I mean, sure, you seem intelligent, I'm just going to read to you, I'm going to read something. And then, like, in England, they're like, wait, what, you read? No, we don't educate that, that's not good. And he's just like, well, it happened, and I don't really know what to do. Like, I can't undo it, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And it seems weird that you don't let your dragons do things that they want. Yeah, whole thing. It's very funny seeing him kind of in this world. And also just interacting with all these different cultures and be like, hey, no, like, this is different, this is better, this is worse, this is not great, this is, you know, these Prussians are very set on their military drills, but they can't quite understand how, like, a more freelance formation might help out. Like, very, very kind of interesting, and just also him being exposed to all these different cultures. On that note, I do feel like I should mention, because Naomi Novik is a white woman from, I think, from the U.S., maybe from England. Where are you from? You say? Lives in New York City, probably from the US. But either way, me as a white person, I don't want to speak kind of overall, but at least from a quick search, it seems like she has had some missteps in terms of representation. But, and I'll get into that more so, because that more so applies to the Scholomance series. But from what I can see, I probably have blind spots. Not probably, I definitely do. But she seems to have done a lot of research into these cultures and to be quite thoughtful about how she, or tried to be quite thoughtful about how she portrays them. Tharke, again, the half Nepali, half white person, gentleman, is very much, he is portrayed as someone who is not given kind of the respect he should be in English society, and as a result of that, and kind of the bitterness that has engendered in him, how he approaches the world is by forcing that into the open. He's very caustic and very abrasive, because he's essentially, look, if you're going to treat me this way, I'm going to force the issue so I know what I'm dealing with. Like, there she's showing, again, people who seem to have kind of gone through these experiences and have figured out ways to deal with them or approach them that seem realistic and don't seem like it strays into any sort of like model minority or any sort of like those other the various stereotypes, the model minority, the noble savage, all these various things. It seems to be kind of explained much more in terms of the individual and their choices. There are, Chinese folks who are like, no, you British people are idiots. I know you act like you're better than us, but we think we're better than you. It's very, very interesting, and I think done quite well. Could always be done better, of course, but very well done, and mostly just kind of all the different aspects of Temeraire and Lawrence learning from all these different cultures and their exposures to them, and learning from one another, learning like kind of how to treat one another as people and how to advocate for, especially like dragons in England. That becomes a major focus, at least over these first few novels of like, hey, why aren't we treated better? Like, is that okay? Like, do we deserve to be treated poorly? But in China we don't. What's going on? And this especially like because Temeraire is relatively young, and you have someone who is essentially his guardian going through and kind of reckoning with that and be like, you know what, no, like I'm from there and I believe this, but no, it's not right. We need to work on that. We need to try and fix it. We need to advocate for you and for your people, your species, however you would phrase it. But yeah, it's definitely, it's a good series. I would definitely read it again. They're all pretty short. Like this is, how long are you? 314 pages. very short, pretty quick read. Also has quite a bit of humor just in between the misunderstandings, and then especially from some of the characters like Arcady, who's one of the feral dragons, very much just set up as someone who is like is gonna try and get away with whatever he can. Will kind of say whatever he wants or to get away with, to like get what he wants, even if it's not true. But also is just phenomenally just like, yeah, like, you know, he scares away one person and then tells a story about how he fought them to the death and like won, and is like all puffing himself up. Like it's there's a lot of weird like odd characters like that going on in this book. Not just the dragons, the people, like everyone. There's a good chunk of humor, even though it does get pretty grim at times, which I really appreciated. Also, the cover, I liked all the covers have like different dragons and scenes from different spots. Also, this is just a side note and doesn't really have anything to do with it, but the spine of the whole series, when you line it all up, it spells Temeraire and it has a picture across the side. I'm always a sucker for that. Any sort of like, this is the thing and it goes together well. Like, yes, perfect. So yeah, that was Black Powder War by Naomi Novik. Definitely pretty good series. If you don't like dragons, this series is definitely not for you. If you don't like kind of historical fiction, historical fantasy, alternative history, however you would phrase it, also not for you. But definitely overall like a very good multicultural story, or a story at least that very much tries to be multicultural and to examine kind of a lot of different aspects of society at this time and aspects that still kind of hang out today. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this first video, first official video, except for the introduction. Yeah, if it sounds like something you're interested in checking out, go for it. I'll put at least the title and the author information in the description. But yeah, and I think that's going to be it. We'll see you all next time.